United States Senate today voted on the same bipartisan border bill that failed back in February. And guess what? It failed again. And it was part of the Biden camp's strategy to point fingers at the Republican Party for not actually wanting to do anything about the migrant crisis and the issues we're having in the nation's southern border. Now, at the same time, Joe Biden is planning to announce his executive actions for the nation's southern border following the Senate's inability to pass this legislation. And he plans to make the announcement after Mexico's June 2nd presidential election. Now, according to Politico, who spoke to 6 people familiar with the Biden administration's plans, it would give Joe Biden the power to shut down the southern border if illegal crossings surge or exceed a certain daily threshold. We don't have any more details on that, including what the number would be to essentially exceed that threshold. However, a White House official said that the timing and details could shift since the plans are still being discussed internally. So that's probably why we're not getting as much specificity. Now, everyone is pretty angry about this, okay? Since Biden's executive action is likely to mirror some of the harsher provisions in that bipartisan Senate bill, obviously, it's upsetting progressive lawmakers, including Senator Alex Padilla from California. He says, quote, "I certainly hope this isn't the new starting position for Democrats in future negotiations on immigration. I made that concern very clear to my colleagues, Leader Schumer, and to the House." Now, Democrats in general are angry about the gridlock in Congress that essentially stands in the way of passing any real comprehensive immigration reform. Representative Angie Craig from Minnesota says, rather than just say it's Republicans' fault, I think the time is now for the administration to step forward and issue executive actions and prove to America that we want to address these issues. I should note that Representative Craig is in a purple district and is vulnerable for re-election. And so she has an interest in addressing this issue because it has become a political liability for some Democrats and certainly has become a political liability for Biden as well, which is why he seems to be willing to go against the progressives in Congress in order to deal with this through executive actions that they are not gonna like. And Republicans, of course, are furious that the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer today decided to tee up a vote on that bipartisan immigration bill, knowing it was gonna fail, knowing that it was part of a political tactic to essentially help Biden in his campaigning for re-election. I should note, by the way, the bill failed 43 to 50. Obviously, you need 60 votes in the Senate in order to meet that filibuster threshold and pass legislation. And so I'll give you some of the statements from Republicans in just a moment. But Cenk, do you think that this is the right way for Biden to handle the migrant crisis impacting the country at our nation's border?
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you, thank you.
So I have a lot of mixed thoughts on this. So first off, I do have some sympathy for Biden right now because he's stuck in a very tough situation where Congress just won't pass anything because Trump told him not to. And then so he's got to take some executive action, and he doesn't have a lot of options in executive action. So this, thing that he's doing where he just blocks everyone, including asylum seekers, it's not an ideal solution at all. But there's not a lot of nuance you could do with executive orders like this. On the other hand, I have no sympathy for Biden because he created this mess by not doing anything for 3 years about this. And he should have come up with his own plan, which he didn't. And now at the end, he's panicking and taking part of Trump's plan. So, maybe you should have tried leading. So now at the same time, you look over the Republican side and they can cry me a river. So they're the ones obviously blocking any legislation from passing because their dear leader told them to. They say this is the #1 issue, and then they say we don't want to solve it because Trump told us not to. Okay, all right, well then you guys are all losers and you're all political hacks, and it's super obvious. And then, you want to talk about cry me a river. They're saying, I can't believe Biden is making this political and Schumer's making it political by introducing this bill in the Senate. You guys killed your own proposal.
Yes.
Because Trump said that it would help Biden. You made it more political than anyone else, let alone the fact that all of it is political. I'm so tired of these politicians.
Now, White House officials are standing by Schumer's decision to push the second bound to fail vote. They see it as a way to give Democrats as much runway as possible to hammer Republicans for voting against the deal in February at Donald Trump's behest. And that was reported by Politico, so you're absolutely right, Cenk. I mean, we all know how that all played out because you had a Republican in the Senate front and center in negotiating that bipartisan legislation. And that individual, of course, was Senator Lankford, who actually didn't end up voting in favor of the legislation this time around, even though it's the same bill that he negotiated previously. So after the vote failed to pass the border bill, Schumer declared that the contrast between Democrats and Republicans is clear today and will be ever clearer in November. Democrats want to fix the border, do they though? And get something done. Republicans want to give speeches, let the border fester, and do absolutely nothing to fix the problem. And there is truth to the second part of his statement, because to your point, Cenk, the Republicans in the Senate seemed poised to pass the bipartisan immigration reform bill, but once they got word from Trump that he wanted to run on immigration, they decided to kill it. Lankford, one of the 4 Republicans who voted in February to advance the measure, did not support it this time, calling it a prop. Quote, "Today is a political messaging exercise," he said, during debate on the bill that doesn't help us as a country. And as you can tell, this is part of Biden's strategy because the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, just yesterday on Wednesday, opened the press briefing with another call for Republicans to pass the border bill. Here's what that looked like.
Senate Republicans will have another opportunity to decide whether they want to support the toughest, fairest border security agreement in decades or continue putting their partisan political interest ahead of the nation's security. Let's not forget, after months of negotiations, we reached a bipartisan agreement that would have delivered the significant policy changes, resources, and personnel needed to secure our border and make our country safer. That included thousands of additional Border Patrol agents and Customs and Border Protections personnel, technology to catch fentanyl, and personnel to go after drug traffickers, asylum officers and immigration judges to improve the processing of asylum cases so they are resolved in a few months and not years, a temporary emergency authority to shut down the border when the system is overwhelmed.
So you see the coordination here, and yes, there's some political maneuvering happening, but I also wanted to show you that video because it is true that the legislation also allocated resources that are desperately needed at the border, resources that are desperately needed to more quickly adjudicate these asylum cases so they don't take literally years. And that's another thing that Republicans are complaining about, right? That asylum seekers are released into the country and they remain in the country for several years until their case is even heard by a judge. Now, when it comes to the allocation of resources, the president typically is unable to do that through executive order. And so we don't know exactly what Biden's gonna do just yet. We're starting to hear the rumors of the executive action, but so far it appears that the only executive action that Biden is gonna take has to do with, essentially giving himself the ability to shut down the border once there's a surge of people trying to come into the country. In terms of the resources necessary, it is unlikely that Biden's gonna be able to do anything about that. It's really up to Congress to pass legislation that allocates the resources necessary for the judges, for the Border Patrol agents, and everything else. My point is, dealing with the country's issues through executive order, whether we're talking about a Democratic president or Republican president, is not the right way to run the country. Congress is supposed to be there for a purpose, and they have been negligent in their jobs for a long time now. They're just useless. And so I have no doubt that Biden's executive order will be challenged, probably by some progressive organizations, maybe by something like the ACLU. It'll go through the courts. There's a possibility it'll be reversed. This isn't the way to govern the country. Our system of checks and balances isn't working because we literally have a branch of the government that has decided that all they care about is raising money for themselves, engage in insider trading, and in the meantime, the American people suffer as a result of that.
Yeah. So unfortunately, everybody involved in this story is pathetic. So Joe Biden went down to the border a couple of weeks ago at the same day that Trump did. Apparently, that was the only day he could find, and he basically begged Trump to let him do Trump's policy on immigration.
Yep.
It was one of the saddest things I've ever seen. Then you turn to the Republicans, and they're saying it's unfair that Schumer is making us vote against our own proposal. Well, I've got an easy fix for you guys. How about you vote for your own proposal? Boom, problem solved. But instead you won't. You'll lick Donald Trump's boots because you're all pathetic grifters.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.